Hi, good afternoon. Welcome to the lecture. My name is Chu Pang. I'm the first-year master's degree student in applied psychology. As part of the applied neuroscience module assessment, this lecture aims to increase public awareness of the progress and the benefits of the brain research. So what is brain research? So brain research is the scientific study of the structure and the function of the human brain and the nervous system. It is the ultimate challenge for scientists to understand the functional organization of the brain, the capacity to produce perception, thought, language, memory, emotion, and action, etc. So, does anybody know how the memory works? After this lecture, you will know. Okay. For example, last Friday I left work for my weekend, and a colleague asked me, "Don't forget you have a Monday morning early session for the first aid training." So I said, okay. And the whole weekend I was working on my assignment. I have to submit on the last hour on Sunday evening, and I did not give a talk. But on Monday morning, I got up the bed, autopilot into the kitchen, get my breakfast, light the fire, and just about to eat my breakfast, I suddenly remembered I have an early session training, and I can't even afford to sit there to have my breakfast, so I head straight to my workplace to get my training done. So this reminds me how the brain produces memory. Let's take a look of the history, how we arrived here to understand the brain. Okay? In history, there is a person called Phoenix Gage. And Phoenix Gage is 25 years old, and he is a very competent construction worker. And he was making the railroad road. Accidentally, there's an explosion happened, and sent a 1 meter long iron bar through his skull on his frontal of the brain. That iron bar landed 6 meters behind him, and he was okay at the beginning because he was able to write down what happened on the workbook, and he was conscious all the way to see his GP. Although he had 2 days infection and followed a month of unconsciousness, but he survived. However, he has personality change drastically. His brain had affected his behavior, and this is the first recorded medical case that we observed brain function related to personality. So before the accident, he was very competent, very obedient, and very nice, courteous person. After he actually indulges the grossest profanity. Okay, that's the personality change that period. And couldn't find jobs anywhere. And he died 12 years later in a seizure. 25 years later, there's an Italian physician who has how to visualize the nerve tissue. The picture shows the nerve cell include the cell body, axon, and the branching dendrites. So Gauci is the name of the physician, and his discovery laid down the fundamental principle for understanding the structural organization of the brain and the spinal cord. And 12 years after Gauci's discovery, anybody know how to pronounce this name? It's called Jia Hao, okay? It's a Spanish name, Jia Hao, yeah. In 1887, used Gauci's method. He found the structure of the nervous system, that nerve cells were individual elements. Although they were in contact with each other, they don't fuse. So Jia Hao also discovered the spines on dendrites, okay? So Jia Hao's work remained one of the greatest contributions to neuroscience. So, human being, we are covered with nerves in our body. So it's a network of nerves, and this is called nervous system. The nervous system we divide it into central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. The central nervous system is your brain and your spinal cord. And the peripheral nervous system is anywhere else apart from the brain and the spinal cord. Okay, so all animals have brains. The human's brain is symmetrical in the middle. And the brain uses sensory information from your eyes, ears, you can hear, you can smell, your mouth can taste. All those are sensory organs. They feed into your brain and they integrate the information to make sense and figure out how to act. The spinal cord and the hindbrain and the midbrain and the forebrain, these four parts are the structure for all animals. And the human's forebrain is 77% volume of the total brain, unlike the animals. And the human brain developed longest, up to 25 years. This diagram, you can see there is how the baby evolves, okay, how the baby develops in the womb. And you see there's diencephalon is formed during embryogenesis, namely a primary relay and the processing center for sensory information and the autonomic control. Brain areas implicated in the ADHD include the brainstem, thalamus, hypothalamus, HPA axis, cerebellum, the frontal and the prefrontal cortex, basal ganglia, limbics, and RAS system. Basically, a lot of crucial part of your brain was involved in this unfortunate illness, disorder. So let's have a look at the normal function of these important areas. The brainstem includes medulla oblongata, the pons, and the midbrain, which controls the basic survival needs, namely the breathing, the blood circulation, the digestion, etc. And also it filters the sensory and motor information back and forth between the brain and the rest of the body. Underneath of the back brain, there is a part of the brain called cerebellum. It's called small brain. And this small brain is functions is control the coordination, motor coordination. Thalamus is situated on the top of the brainstem. Its function is sorting information and sending messages where it's should go. Okay. And the hypothalamus is situated on the right above your roof of your mouth, okay? And this function is homeostasis, which means it maintains your body temperature. Now it's very hot, I'm sweating, all this because hypothalamus is doing the work. And the fluids, blood pressure, blood sugar, etc. Okay? So, posterior pituitary, and it is also called hypophysis, sense of signals, the hormones, and that is called antidiuretic hormone that keeps your water balance. Sense of oxytocin hormone to increase your empathy, love, feeling, and desire. And you know when you have a cat, the cat purrs when you're touching it, and that will increase your oxytocin hormone as well. So it's good to have a pet. Cerebrum. Cerebrum is divided into two hemispheres that connected in the middle via corpus callosum. Each hemisphere contains four lobes: frontal, parietal, temporal, and occipital. The left side of the brain is concerned with assembled words and sentence structure in the language, numerical skills, scientific skills, spoken language, and your right-hand side of the body. And you can see a lot of people with ADHD, they are actually brilliant in those maths, okay, because the left side of the brain, there's no, very little, it says relatively little attention memory control, okay. It mainly in the right-hand side of the brain that controls attention, memory, reasoning, and problem-solving and self-control. Okay. So the frontal and the prefrontal cortex. The frontal lobes involve attention, behavior, self-control, and the ability to speak, and the executive functions. So basically, it is the boss of the rest of the brain, and it makes plans and makes sure you have self-control. Okay. So if that part is damaged, it's catastrophic. The prefrontal cortex contains cognitive processes that select appropriate movements at the correct time and place. The section may be controlled by internalized information or by external cues, and may be made in response to, coming from different experience. So when you hear Phoenix Gage has a massive brain damage on the prefrontal lobe, and that is definitely, you can see from here, it has totally destroyed his the self-control part and the emotional control. Okay, so you can see why his personality changed after that. The basal ganglia. The basal ganglia situated under the corpus callosum. So the brain, the top part of the brain is really like tree barks. We call it cortex. And underneath there's the basal ganglia. Basal ganglia is underneath of the corpus callosum and controls complex interaction of inhibition and excitatory response, include motor neurons. People with ADHD also include those Parkinson's disease. Okay, you have the problems obvious, and it's always relate to basal ganglia. So the limbic and RAS system, the amygdala is the principal structure in the limbic system. It plays a role in self-regulation, behaviors, including the emotion, personal memories, spatial behavior, and social behavior. A lot of people, they'll say, I just couldn't get on with other people. There's a problem there. Okay. Yeah. Reticular.
You might want to use this close.
Okay. So reticular activating system carries electrical signals and the chemical signals through the brain. So RAS is short for reticular activating system. It controls the sleep and work cycle, and also helps the person stay alert and attentive to the surroundings. So if you don't sleep well, you often find you have problem remember things or keep yourself alert or focused. Okay. So what is neuron? Neuron is your nerve cell. Okay. The nerve cell sends signals using action potential. Earlier I have mentioned the memory, how the brain produces memory. So here's the answer. The brain simmers with activity and a different group of neurons, namely the nerve cells, responsible for different thoughts or perception. So for memory, there is a particular specific group of neurons. They are responsible for memories. Okay. So in order to remember something, you need persistent changes in the strength of connections between neurons. So neuron send a message to the target cell, and if the signal is strong, and that will cause a spike, and that's called action to potential. So these connections can be made stronger or weak, depends on the events. So you don't remember everything in your day, what happened today. There are thousands, but you just pass, you don't really remember because they are just unnoticeable, insignificant. So if the signal is weak, it will have non-action potential. If there's strong signal and you have action potential, okay? So a connection between two neurons becomes stronger when one neuron constantly activates another neuron, okay? So why I remembered that day is because I had the past experience. I must miss my meetings in the past. So it has had a strong encoding, okay, in my brain. So I suddenly remembered there is a meeting I need to go. So action potentials is working by depolarizing a cell. The neuron set up depolarization through sodium-potassium pump by opening up these ion channels so they can send action potentials down the neuron axon terminal. Okay? So the ions that carry electrical charges are both inside and outside of the neuron cells. If my body is a neuron cell body, my hands here is the dendrites, okay? And my legs there is axon, okay? So this cell is connected to another cell with a gap is called synapse. Okay. So when a signal coming from my last cell come down to me, in order to reach me, we need to understand what's inside the neuron cell. Okay. So inside the neuron cell, there is negatively charged chlorine, positively charged sodium. Negatively charged chlorine, positively charged sodium. This is outside of my environment. And inside the cells, there's the negatively charged protein and the positively charged potassium. The normal voltage on the inside the neuron resting state is at minus 70 milliwatts. If the voltage is much higher outside the neuron cell, the electrostatic pressure will cause diffusion, whereby the sodium channel opens to let outside sodium flow in and raise the voltage. Because inside the voltage is minus 70 milliwatts. Now the voltage has been risen. Once the voltage reaches the threshold of minus 55 milliwatts, it will have all non-action potential. The depolarization happens. Okay? And once this happens, it causes the potassium ion channels to open from inside. And sodium channels closes at voltage as the voltage reaches the peak. And normally it's at plus 40 milliwatts. Because the inside of the neuron is now on positive charges, so the potassium flows out and the repolarization happens until the neuron cell back more or less to its resting state. So there's, I leave you to imagine if it's underneath, if it goes to over minus 70 milliwatts, this is called hyper depolarization. Okay. So you know how the cell works, how the signals transmit to each other. So the body is constantly doing that, and all the cells are in and out of action. Okay. So neurotransmitters are chemical messages, and we have discovered 100 of neurotransmitters, and there are mainly handful of them that perform the most functions in the nervous system, and those are glutamate, involved in the function of memory. And you have GABA. GABA involves calming, will calm you down, okay, calm you down. And glycine, digest fat, serotonin, mood, some people are very moody. Histamine, dilate blood capillaries. And the dopamine. Dopamine is a pleasure neurotransmitter, okay? Dopamine makes the person motivating. Okay? Epinephrine it will increase the oxygen, and norepinephrine will help you concentrate. So every single one of these neurotransmitters, they have main functions. Okay? So ADHD brain research. What does ADHD stand for? Anyone? Very good. Okay. ADHD is the brain's dysfunction involved in multiple large-scale networks. So it's not isolated regions of the brain having a dysfunction. Okay. It is chronic, pervasive neurodevelopmental disorder that can impair an individual's academic, social skills, and leading to significant emotional distress. Well, I know some people, they were teenagers, who keep telling me, I just can't find a friend. You can't find a friend, you need to look inside. Okay? ADHD is caused by genetic predisposition, and it's not your fault, and neurobiological dysregulation that results in a typical brain functioning. Numerous brain imaging studies suggest a wide-ranging structural and connection irregularities in people diagnosed with ADHD. There are 3 symptom groups: inattention, hyperactivity, impulsivity. So inattention involves an inability to finish tasks, organize and sustain efforts, as well as forgetfulness and distractibility. Okay. And hyperactivity involves being fidgety, inability to sit still. Oh, you are all sitting still, yeah, okay. And excessive motoric activity. Impulsivity involves excessive talking, answering without thinking, inability to wait one's turn, and interrupting. Okay, we see that what some people are excessively. Brain research focused primarily on the relationship between the symptoms and the brain structure, brain functions, and the neurotransmitter system. Okay. Improper utilization of the neurotransmitter dopamine, listen to dopamine, is implicated. Okay? And to a lesser extent, norepinephrine may contribute to ADHD. So dopamine is the motivation neurotransmitter. Dopamine controls reward and the pleasure center and affects numerous behaviors: movement, modulation, cognitive functioning, mood, and attention. So ADHD's neurotransmitter, we're focusing only on the dopamine. To understand how the brain research is carried out, I'm going to give you an example. And let's take the dopamine reward pathway in ADHD, for instance. ADHD reward motivation deficit is typically characterized by abnormal behavior change following, okay, say for example, I give you 50 euro, can you do something for me? I'm not interested. I give you 300, he wouldn't be interested because there's no motivation there. Okay, there's no motivation. So you give him a reward and you increase the reward, still doesn't make any impact. So ADHD and neurotransmitters in children, hyperactivity in ADHD was observed in children mostly in the systems involved in executive function and attention, observed predominantly in the default ventral attention and the somatomotor networks. So those just tell you what areas they are being observed. So in adults, ADHD-related hypoactivation was predominantly in the frontal parietal system. Earlier I already told you, this is the frontal lobe, this is the parietal lobe. So it is mainly, for adults, it's mainly around this area. While ADHD-related hyperactivity was present in the visual, dorsal, attention, and default networks. Dopamine reward pathway. ADHD brain have low levels of neurotransmitters of norepinephrine, which is linked to dopamine, that controls the reward and the pleasure center. fMRI studies showed decreased nucleus accumbens activation with processing of reward in participants of ADHD. So even fMRI is done, they discover the participants with ADHD, the certain areas, the crucial areas, they have decreased activity. Dopaminergic neurons are located in the midbrain structure, substantia nigra, and the ventral tegmental area, the dorsal and the ventral prefrontal cortex. Additional brain structure influenced by reward include the supplemental motor area in the frontal lobe, the rhinal cortex in the temporal lobe, the pallidum and the thalamic nucleus in the basal ganglia, and a few others. In the basal ganglia and the mesolimbic pathway, activated seeking behavior such as locomotor activity is influenced by dopaminergic drugs, so they use drugs to test out. And the microdialysis experiments reveal that dopamine is released during the anticipation of a reward. So we use normal people, they found they actually, there's a dopamine release in those areas. The wanting behavior associated with a rewarding stimulus can be increased by micro-injections into certain areas of the brain. Opioid injections in the area produce pleasure. However, outside of this hedonic area hotspots, they create increased desire. More depletion and inhibition of dopamine in neurons of the nucleus accumbens decreases appetitive but not consummatory behavior. Dopamine further implicated in motivation as administration of amphetamine. So this drug we're trying to see if there's any effect. Increases the breakdown of progressive racial self-reinforcement schedule. So they used animal to do the experiment, and they found subjects will be willing to go to the great lengths to obtain a reward, and they backpedal more, okay, as a lot. So research used ligands. So ligands to bound the dopamine transporters. And the D2, D3 receptors found that specific binding was lower in ADHD than the control in the regions of dopamine reward pathway and in the left-hand side of the brain. So mesoaccumbens dopamine reward pathway projects from the ventral tegmental area in the midbrain to the nucleus accumbens is critically involved in reward and motivation. So all those, they use PET scan to follow those ligands, the shining on the scan, where they go. Okay, they found out in ADHD they are actually much lower, those activation. So PET, postural emission tomography is used to measure the dopamine synapses, okay? And they use synaptic marker. They use ligands attached to the synaptic markers. They show in the PET. Participants, there were 53 normal people. There were 53 people. They never take drugs, never take medication for ADHD. They joined the experiment. And the 44 healthy adults. And at the end, they found there's a diagram, there's a table there. You see, and all the normal adults, they have much higher dopamine markers, okay, transport markers. So dopamine synaptic markers reduction were found in areas associated with symptoms of inattention. The brain regions of, what are the brain regions of interest in this experiment? It is the nucleus accumbens, midbrain, left caudate, and the hypothalamus region. So this is an example of how they carry out the brain research. So what is the significance of the brain research here? It contributes to the better understanding of the ADHD dopamine reward pathway, so that patients can benefit from better understanding and treatment from the therapists, the doctor. And the limitation of this research is the frontal regions cannot be measured with the current PET radioligands, because both D2, D3 receptors and the DAT levels in the frontal region are very low. Okay, so there's a room for improvement. We are here. We can join. I'm going to hand over to my colleagues who will continue to talk about the treatment of ADHD and what is the supplementary treatment as well. Okay, thanks.